Hello, everyone. This is your host, Susan Rosen, and my guest today is Ed. Oh, I forgot to ask you
Frauenheim.
how to pronounce your name. Say it again.
Frauenheim.
Oh, Frauenheim. Okay, I probably could have guessed it that one. Um, and Ed is here to talk about something that's very interesting. I think very important, and that I don't know how long you've been working or involved with this particular part of it, but we can talk about that as well in the
Sure.
podcast. So welcome, Ed. It's a real pleasure to have you here.
Thanks very much, Susan. I'm grateful to be here with you. And would you like me to give a quick introduction as we
Please, I'm
get
sorry, I should have
started?
said that.
No
I'm
worries.
sitting here expecting it. And
Uh, yeah, so I'm Ed Frauenheim. I'm an author, a speaker, and a consultant focusing on masculinity matters and workplace culture. My background is as a journalist, like 20 or 25 years of that. Eventually moved to study workplace cultures at Great Place to Work, which is a research and consulting firm that puts together the Fortune 100 best companies to work for list. So I got to study some of the best workplaces and leaders in the world. And at the same time, I was exploring my own kind of challenges with masculinity as a man. I'm now 55. And all that kind of culminated in a book called Reinventing Masculinity that came out in 2020, co-authored with Ed Adams. And we looked at the way men are called to show up in different ways in order to have healthier, fuller, more soulful lives. And when they do that, they help others around them have those benefits as well. So that's a little me in a nutshell there.
okay. And so what are you doing now? Are you just traveling with the book, or are you working with groups? What are you doing at this point with everything you've done?
I am offering talks and
Uh-huh.
workshops on masculinity,
Oh,
especially like at
okay.
work, how
Uh-huh.
important to reinvent masculinity at work.
Mhm.
Another topic is quiet men at work. It's in other words, the intersection of introversion and masculinity.
Ah,
And
okay.
my colleague and partner Jennifer Conweiler and I have written about how now is the time for quiet men. That a lot of the skills of men who have been introverted, who are more thoughtful, better listeners, more interested in deeper connections. Those are really skills that are needed right now.
Mhm.
Apart from that, I help organizations with leadership consulting and communications.
Mm.
So it's kind of a mix of things right now. But I've
Uh-huh.
been doing this for about 2.5 years on my own at this point, and yeah, it's an exciting time.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds very interesting. Very interesting. So, okay. So let's start with maybe how you got interested in this particular subject enough to really sit down and write a book about it.
Sure, going right for my vulnerable spot, Susan. Which is to
Sorry.
say, I struggled being a guy, or at
Uh-huh.
least in the ways we were expected to be guys. You know, you're
Yeah.
supposed to be strong and confident and
Hmm.
great with the ladies, at least for us heterosexual guys. And
Uh-huh.
I grew up kind of skinny, kind of insecure, sensitive, and did not win sports championships, even though I was in a couple final games, and that really like actually had a pretty haunting effect on me. And
Uh-huh.
when I got to the work world, I mean, in some ways, on the surface, I looked like I was a successful guy. I was a writer at technologies site, cnetnews.com,
Uh-huh.
writing articles, and up to now in Fortune, USA Today, and other places. But one of the things I didn't do that guys are often expected to do is become leaders in organizations, right? And
Okay.
so
Uh-huh.
I have led one person for one day. I may have the smallest management career in history. I don't think she left because of me. She had previous plans, and I was, assigned to be her
Right.
manager.
Uh-huh.
But it all kind of took a toll on me, and like I wasn't showing up the way you're supposed to be a guy, and there was a lot of
Mhm.
a lot of hurt around that, and self criticism.
Mm.
So I was writing about this especially as I got to be a dad of two kids. Now they're 18 and 20. I
Oh
would be
my
writing
God.
personal essays, and then I was noticing in the work world as I was studying these great workplaces that men are called to show up differently. You couldn't
Mm.
be the barking boss, the commanding chief or general, if you will, and be successful. Some of the research we did at Great Place to Work was showing that that older approach to being a guy at work and a leader at work was, risking you coming across as rigid, cold, and isolated when the world is now calling for flexibility, warmth, and connection. And that's so I was putting these things together, and then I connected with my co-author who had studied the psychological aspects of masculinity and
Okay.
had helped roll out these new American Psychological Association guidelines that said when men have a rigid traditional view of masculinity, they have worse health outcomes. They don't live as long. They have more problems with substance abuse, et cetera. And we came together and put kind of that workplace, the psychological aspects, and then kind of our shared interest in a better world. Because we do think, as you and I were talking about earlier, that we've got to redefine masculinity for us to solve these global problems like climate change, war, and cooperating on pandemics, et cetera. Because we've been too combative and too hyper masculine, I think, in our culture.
Yeah, yeah, that's so interesting. That's the wrong way to say it. Are there role models from the 40s and the 50s that all of these men thought that they were supposed to be emulating?
Yeah, it's a great question. I recently have been joining and talked to a group of older men in the LA area. They call themselves the Life Transition Group. It's mostly men, about 30 of them or so, and they grew up in that time. And they say John Wayne was the role model. You're supposed to be, that kind of tough cowboy. You don't show weakness. You're strong. What they said, one of the fellows in that was put it so well, I thought, that there were some great values shared in that era of hard work. John Wayne he wasn't lazy, what this fellow had said was you weren't really prepared for what happens if it doesn't work out, even though you worked hard. Like, there wasn't a lot of tools for failure. Guys were supposed to succeed, and if you didn't succeed, you're kind of a loser, and had to deal with that shame and that self laceration on your own. Does that resonate with you? I mean, in terms of what you?
Yeah. I think so. I'm just thinking like about my father, who was born in 1918.
Wow.
No, 1908. My mother was born in 1918. And yeah, and he came from a family of 10 kids.
Wow.
And he just always felt very responsible, to earn a good living and, support his family and all this kind of stuff. And there's just things that, and I'm not going to get into all the specifics, but there are things that happened during his life that he just like, oh my God, what did I do? Kind of. And I think I always felt like he was kind of a out of his element kind of thing. Because he was one of those people who get along with everybody. He was a salesman without being salesy. Everybody loved him. And
nice.
Yeah, but yeah, it just seemed like like he was just, I don't know. He and my aunts and my uncles and stuff, they all did that. They all owned their own businesses. They were all successful businessmen. The girls, almost all the girls got married and had kids. It was so, yeah.
Kind of simple rules and more rigid roles that you could play.
Yeah.
Era.
Yeah.
When you say that he didn't feel like he was in his element, are you saying that there's a certain ways he could not be himself in a way growing up in that time and with some of the expectations on him as a man?
Yeah, I think there are times when and this is going to sound really strange, but I think there are times that he didn't say no to people,
Okay.
when he actually should have, which got him into a lot of trouble for a while there. But and he married somebody who was very, well, we won't go there. Anyways, it was just an interesting dynamic.
Just
Put
what
it
you
that way.
said there, I don't want to probe or
Yeah,
push,
no, that's
but
okay.
what
I
you
don't
said
want to.
about,
I would tell you, but I'm not when we're already being
okay, fair
recorded.
enough.
Thank you.
I am, one thing that came up for me as you're saying that is
Uh-huh.
one of the messages we've gotten through what I would call our pretty hyper masculine culture is
Mm,
more and more and more. It's hard for
mhm.
guys to say no to business opportunities or to taking on a lot because we're
Mhm.
supposed to be able to shoulder so much,
Right. Yeah.
and you're weak if you say no, say
Mm.
to
Yeah,
an
that's a good point.
opportunity.
Yeah.
And I think that only now, that's all part of what I would call, we call in our book a confined masculinity, which is to
Mm.
say with very limited roles and very limited ways of relating. And some of those
Mhm.
roles included the provider, the protector, procreator, have a lot of kids. But then you're supposed to relate in ways that are almost always about competition and investing other people in achieving get to the top of
Ah.
something. And
Interesting.
also being stoic, so you can't show a lot of emotion except maybe anger,
Yeah.
and also self-reliant. That's that disconnected piece where you're not supposed to get help from others.
Mm.
And so all those things, a lot of those elements aren't necessarily bad by themselves, but they're not enough for us to be fully human, is one of the arguments
Mm.
we make in our book, and therefore to have a
Mhm.
healthier life.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Interesting. So, are any of those, or no, maybe rephrase that. What are some of the things that women typically do as opposed to the men, right? That are helpful if the men would do them, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's great way to frame it. Yeah, you're getting at the way in which we are kind of calling for men to embrace their feminine side,
Okay.
embrace what we would call feminine energies of
Uh-huh.
action, compassion, vulnerability,
Mm.
stillness. Not necessarily having to go and get more. One of the ways we think of that I've started thinking about it, and I came up with a term with a friend of mine named Jim Young, that we talk about the arrow and circle man, because so much of our time we've forgotten the circle. We were just about the go, penetrate, be aggressive, go for yours, and yet this
Uh-huh.
is more the feminine side of, in a way, like let's be
Yeah.
open to things, let's be connected to each other, let's be
Mm.
compassionate and hug, the circle of the arms.
Mm-hmm.
So those are energies that all human beings have access to, but women have, that's those qualities in some ways have been shoved over to the women, and it's actually women get in trouble when they try to be too masculine, right? And also
Yes.
they're expected to be that in the work world. But
Mm-hmm.
in any event, those are some feminine qualities or energies that we're inviting men to embrace. And when they do
Mm.
that, they can
Mm.
have a richer life. They can have a
Mm-hmm.
healthier life, including having some of the relationships that we now know are so for living longer and living in a healthier way.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. No, and that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, because I mean, even in the workplace, part of the female or women complaints, right? We're always, you're not letting us in. You're
Mm,
not including us in the meetings. You're not including us
yeah.
in all these things. And you know, that's not a great atmosphere for anybody to be in, the men or the women,
That's a great
right?
point, Nikki. Thank you. You're speaking to, I think, one of the downsides of that confined masculinity is it's about who can be the king of the hill. And there are
Yes.
limited spots at the top. And one of the ways men have ordered things in the ones kind of in charge of this in this ethos is that women are less than men, right? They're less valuable. The domestic sphere is a lot less valuable than the commerce,
Right.
per se.
Yeah.
And so they can, even the lowest ranking men can feel like they're better than women, right? They're in this kind of
Uh-huh.
pecking order and hierarchy.
Uh-huh.
And that's another place where I think we're moving in this diversity, inclusion, equity movement is saying, let's
Mm.
change that. We got to like treat everybody as
Mm.
deeply equal. We're not, men are not
Yeah.
better than women. And a lot of evidence is that women are better leaders than men, and that
Mm-hmm.
these methods of leading are not better when it's about kind of um, going for yours and being kind of selfish and competitive and always trying to put down others. It's
Uh-huh.
what we've kind of learned in the Great Place to Work research is that caring rather than scaring gets the best results.
Really? What a surprise.
Well, that's not what was sanctioned when you saw some of these older archetypes,
I
right?
know. Oh my
The
God.
yelling boss, the Lou Grant kind of figure who's only occasionally nice to Mary Tyler Moore, but a lot of like that, I'm going to browbeat my people and
Mm-hmm.
make them produce or else.
Right. 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 Well, and a long time ago, right? Um, it was also a whole thing of, well, why this is my role. Why would you want to be doing this? You should be home having babies,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
you know. And then a part of me looks at that and goes, were they jealous because they couldn't have babies?
Interesting. I love that you raised that point. One of the most interesting pieces of research I've seen about the pandemic, Susan, is
Uh-huh.
that men who spent more time at home and who are fathers have done more parenting, more caregiving, and they like it. They don't want to go back. They've kind of made it part of their
Yeah.
personality, their identity,
Yeah.
and I think to your point, like, who wouldn't want to be loving on their kids when they really have that opportunity? And I think a lot of dads, a lot of men grow up thinking that dads are supposed to be purely enforcers, not to
Mm-hmm.
have a deeply loving relationship. And
Mm-hmm.
what a loss that is for so many guys.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and to give a lot of men some credit, I think part of what ended up happening was they worked all day, and then by the time they came home, they were exhausted,
Yeah.
and they
No,
didn't have any energy left
good point.
to work, be with their kids and really show up for their kids, even if they wanted to.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. And I think we're really kind of dismantling that
Mm,
this
mm,
kind of workaholic, what I would again call like the work world has really, I believe, emulated that confined masculinity, mindset
uh-huh,
or set of attitudes, like such that what matters is just constant more profit. It's not about
yeah,
balance or sustainability. Really, it's not about in the emotional well-being of the people there. You're just supposed to generate,
mm-hmm,
be almost like machinery, like a cog in a
yeah,
wheel. Whereas that
yeah,
if you embrace your whole humanity, you're going to say, I don't want to just be rational and logical, and I want to be able to be, if I'm hurt, like express that and not have to like hide that, or if I'm sad, or if I'm even joyful about something.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I think we're starting to make space for that, and the pandemic actually helped in a lot of ways. And that was a silver lining, is that it kind of, I think, prompted us to rethink a lot of our gender ideas.
I would agree. I would agree. Yeah. It I think there's a lot of men who went, gee, I kind of like to work from home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's as far as they would say it, but that was, it kind of implies a lot of other things.
Right. And another piece that I think, and I'm curious if you saw this too, is like there was a lot of workplaces that were based on distrust. And that's just one
Mm,
of the things that distinguishes great workplaces from not so great ones, is that the
hmm
leaders trusted their people and they kind of had a glass half
mm,
full view of people in an abundant
okay.
sense that people were good, they would try hard, they were capable. And so those organizations kind of thrive when their people went home, because they could trust them, and they did trust them. And A lot of other organizations struggled because they didn't trust the people. They were putting on like surveillance software on the computers. They were
Oh,
doing enough
yeah.
keystrokes. Um, they were just hesitant to let this kind of experiment play out. But
Hmm.
again, like it prompted a lot of recognition that, hey, you know what, people actually are willing to work hard, when they're given a bit more discretion. And productivity actually rose in the first couple months of the pandemic.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure there are a lot of people that were just flabbergasted by that one.
Yeah, I bet
Not
that's
what they were expecting. Yeah. Yeah, because everybody, so many companies fought letting people work from home, even if it was only a couple of days a week before the pandemic, because they were afraid they weren't going to get anything done. They weren't going to do anything.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it has largely worked out. That
Uh-huh.
people do work pretty hard on stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the thing that comes to mind, um, just in talking about that, is that there actually were, even before the pandemic, a lot of examples of people who did work well, not in the office, which were a lot of salespeople,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right? Who weren't even in the city, maybe not even in the state, and worked,
yeah,
maybe they rented an office or they worked from home or whatever it was, and did wonderful jobs.
right.
But no one put those two things together.
Yeah. And one of my
Interesting.
main clients, that's a great point. Like the sales team has been remote for forever, and so many of the office workers were not, and they had to come into work. And those sales folks had great performance. They helped the company grow and do wonderfully financially. They also had great experience scores on their Great Place to Work surveys. So they were having a good
Ah,
experience, given
interesting.
the trust to do their
Yeah.
work in their own space, in their own time, largely.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. And how did the office people rate them?
They still had a good experience overall, but
Oh, okay.
they weren't usually given the opportunity to work from home
Uh-huh.
pre-pandemic.
Right.
But now the company has almost flipped it completely, so very few people go in
Uh-huh.
now, and their scores are rising on their employee sentiment, because I think people are
Ah,
appreciating that the
yeah.
trust is being shown.
Hmm. What a novel concept.
And to to the theme of your podcast, like that's
Uh-huh.
healthy. When there's a lot, I
Yeah.
don't know if you've seen any of the work of Jeffrey Pfeffer out of Stanford. He's found that like stressful management, where people have very little control, where they have job insecurity,
Mm-hmm.
uh, where they can't take care of their life obligations,
Mm-hmm.
those kinds of management systems probably cause more than 100,000 premature deaths a year. It's like 120 or something like that,
Wow.
and
Wow.
like a billion or more in healthcare costs. Um, and when we can create an environment of trust, where we can embrace those more feminine qualities, you might say, of compassion and connecting
Mm-hmm.
people, not through a micromanagement way, but like encouraging the bonds between them and giving them some authority in terms of making decisions, not just not watching them, but having them have
Mm-hmm.
some decision-making power. Those are healthy behaviors, because that gets rid of the toxicity of that workplace culture. And the client I have, the people are often thriving when they just created more discretion for some of their customer service representatives, and these people are like over the moon. They don't even want to take breaks. They love talking to their customers because they have the ability to make an authentic connection with those customers. They
Uh-huh.
don't follow as
Uh-huh.
much of a script. So it's
Well,
pretty good to
and
see.
yeah, really, no, that's neat. And I think the other thing too probably is because they have some, they can actually do something for their customers, right?
Exactly.
They
Exactly.
don't have to say, oh, well, let me go check
Right.
and I'll let you know if I can do that or if you can do that or yeah,
Yep. I think you're exactly right.
yeah,
Like
interesting.
better all around, really, when you can do that, and treat the bad behavior as the exception rather than the rule, that you're setting up
Yes.
guidelines that force everybody else to be kind of treated like a kid as opposed to an adult
Mm-hmm.
at work.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, that's a novel concept, isn't it? Yeah. Well, I think partly some of that as well is will go away with time as
Say
well.
more about that. You're saying,
Well, because the people who, a lot of the people who are running the big companies and
yeah,
small ones or whatever, are they're running them the way that they grew up in it,
yeah. Okay. I see what you're saying.
right? And so it's going to take a while for them to see the difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. And B, um, when they get to the point where they're retiring, which is probably going to be fairly soon,
Right.
right? You've got a whole nother generation coming up who has been pushing against that.
I love that. Yeah. I'm hopeful in the same way you are.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of these, what you see in like millennials, some of the research there is that they don't care as much about getting ahead, quote unquote,
Mm-hmm.
or up the ladder. They are more
Uh-huh.
interested in a meaningful life, where work is
Yeah.
one component. Whereas I grew up,
Yeah.
and maybe folks, you're a little bit older than me, from what you told me
Yeah.
before. That was what a guy did, and maybe women also were career minded. It was about getting those promotions and rising to the top.
Mm-hmm.
And even you
Yep.
would sacrifice your personal life. And these younger folks are saying, no, like silly, like partly because they saw their parents get laid off at the drop of a hat. Well,
That's
why
right.
should I
And
put so much, all this energy and time
yeah.
into that, when I can get laid off, and as soon
Oh
as the
yeah.
stock drops
Yeah.
a little bit.
Yeah. Or they have a heart attack,
Right. Exactly.
right? They get ill. I mean, how many times did we see that happen?
Right. And
You know.
we may have talked about this before. I mean, and that kind of happened to me too, like where I was doing too much. Mostly I was enjoying it, but it was too
Uh-huh.
much.
Yeah.
And I had a heart attack in 2021,
Okay.
at the age of 53, I guess I was at the time, or something
Uh-huh.
like that. And that was from that go, 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 not to say
Mm,
no, like we were talking
mm,
about earlier regarding your father. And I think I
mm-hmm.
had some of those old masculinity beliefs are still in me, even though I'm singing a new song. I've got to take my own medicine, more.
Uh-huh. 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 Yeah. Yeah. Well, the way I look at it, it's never all or nothing, right?
Hmm.
It should be a combination of, yeah, I really want to do a good job. Yeah, I'm going to put the time in and the effort and the emotional time,
Yeah.
right? To do a good job and have a good feeling about what I'm doing. That doesn't mean you have to go overboard. I think that's the lesson that we're all kind of learning, or we all learned, especially in the 80s and 90s.
Hmm.
Um, it was is when it kind of started, and women, although not that women have made that big of an inroad even now, but it's getting better. It is getting
Yeah.
better. Um,
Yeah. I like your point about, it's not all or nothing. Is that how you put it?
mhm.
What was the phrase you used there? Can you say that again? You're talking about
You're
extreme.
talking to somebody whose memory is like
Okay. Well, I
gone.
like this idea that we cannot,
Yeah, no,
lose
no,
sight of the balance, right? And I
that's right.
think,
Right. You can't you have to be able. You still have to be able to do some of those things. It's just not 100%
right,
that you're doing, that you're pushing, that you're taking responsibility for everything, that you're, you know, just, I don't know, putting up all these barriers and other things that to having a nice life because you're working.
right. And I think I see this, with some of the people I work with.
Mm-hmm.
They gravitate to these kind of extreme mottos,
Mm.
like, unstoppable, or some
Uh-huh.
terms that sound good, but if you
Yeah,
take them
yeah.
seriously, and like Amazon had that sort of idea at one point. I think Bezos had some kind of motto along those lines.
Oh,
And,
I'm
and
sure.
Elon Musk and his sort of like hardcore. We
Oh,
want to
please.
people like you have to sleep at the office, and that's just a recipe for burnout, right? And you're going to lose the people that do have great skills and want a good life,
Uh-huh.
also,
Yeah.
right? So it's
Yeah.
we're not out of the woods on that, I think, on that philosophy, but
No.
I think to your point, a lot of younger people are saying no to that. That's craziness.
Yeah.
You know.
Hmm. Yeah. 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 And I think that that's where the full turning point will come, when there just are not enough people signing on to that to
Hmm.
actually do it.
I love
And
that.
then they're gonna have to lower the bar.
Or maybe we change. I love that idea, and maybe we change that metaphor a little bit, Susan, because maybe it's like
Yeah.
change
Raise the bar. Oh.
or did you say nix the bar?
No, I said raise the bar, but no, nix
Raise
the
the
bar.
bar,
That sounds
or
even better. I like that.
yeah, or like change what it
Uh-huh.
means to have
Hmm.
a successful or ideal work,
Yes.
um,
Career.
a career. Um, yeah, so I'm with you on that. Be and I think more than when I came to the work world, there's now ways of screening companies for where am I going to have a healthy experience and a
Hmm.
meaningful experience at work, as you can see whether it's a great place to work, and
Hmm.
there are certified companies where you know that 7 out of 10 of their employees give it a positive rating and they feel good.
Right. Yeah.
Or other, and it's not the only one out there that is rating or providing some clarity.
Mm.
Glassdoor is another place you can find out how
Right.
these are
Yep.
looking. And companies have got to pay attention to that. And there's in a
Yeah.
lot of industries, it becomes a race to the top as opposed to a race to the bottom when it comes to
Ah,
the
yes.
treat people.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, that's a very good point. That's a very good point. Yeah. Interesting. Interesting. Well, we should probably wrap up because you have a appointment, and we can
Sure,
only record so much before people will start getting overloaded. Um,
sure.
but this has been really, really interesting. Um, and I think it's something that's very important, as you were saying, for people's health and wellness, because um, yeah, being under tension and worry all the time about if you're doing a good job, am I doing enough? Am I not doing enough? All that kind of stuff is not good for one's physical well-being.
Agreed. And I'm hopeful that we're moving toward healthier workplaces over time, where you have a blend maybe of those masculine and
Yeah.
feminine energies, a recognition to kind of share leadership more, share decision-making power. But yeah, we need to go there faster even than we are. If we want people to be healthy.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I agree. Well, hopefully then maybe the next generation will get to a certain point and say, nope, wrong, not
Love that.
doing this
Yeah.
anymore.
I think my kids at least are going to do that. So I'll give them a little further nudge in that direction.
Yeah, there you
Tell them you
go.
said so, Susan.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Show them pictures of people that are exhausted. You don't want to be like this.
Right.
Well, on that note, I will say, which I usually say at the end of my podcast, which is that neither of us are doctors, which for this one, we absolutely know that. Sometimes there are doctors, but I say it
Okay.
anyways.
Yeah.
And none of this is medical advice, which I don't think everyone could think any of this was medical advice. Maybe psychiatric, but not, straight medical. And that thank you very much for coming on. I really appreciate it. And it's been very interesting for me as well. And to all of you out there, I will see you all next week.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.